Ted and His Teddy Bear by Lucy Jackson.
Read by Derek Jacobi.
For all those little brown pups, and especially Non and Tess, who love their teddy bears. Ted and His Teddy Bear. Mrs. Forfar had a new puppy. He was quiet and sweet and very sleepy. She carried him about in her arms like a baby. She bought him a bed, which was much too big, and a bowl, a ball, a brush, and a collar. Everything was much too big, and he looked rather small and lonely. Ben and Sophie, who lived next door, came to see him. "He's so tiny," said Ben. "What will you call him, Mrs. Forfar?" asked Sophie. "I'm not sure. Perhaps I'll call him Ted, because he reminds me of my old Teddy, who sits up here on my windowsill." She lifted him down to show the children. Sophie said, "Old Teddy can be his friend and look after him, as he is so little." Ted loved old Teddy. He sat on his lap when he was awake, and curled up beside him when he went to sleep. He sat on the chair with old Teddy while Mrs. Forfar tidied her house, and they sat in the wheelbarrow when she weeded her garden. Sophie and Ben came to play with a little ball for him to chase, but he always went back to snuggle up with old Teddy for a nap. But little Ted grew bigger and stronger every day, and more noisy and playful. He discovered he could bark and wouldn't wait quietly for his dinner. He wanted to race about and would not let Mrs. Forfar get on with her work. He tugged the garden broom when she tried to sweep the path. He ran off with her straw hat and chewed the brim, and buried her gardening gloves in the flower bed. He twirled about indoors and rolled up the rugs. He pulled the cushions off the sofa and tussled them about. He ran out of doors with old Teddy and left him, by mistake, in the rain. Worst of all, he pulled old Teddy's ear so hard it came right off. Mrs. Forfar had to sew it on again, and she was not pleased. Sophie and Ben laughed when they saw Ted hiding behind a chair, trying to keep out of trouble. "I'm putting old Teddy back on the windowsill," said Mrs. Forfar. "He needs a rest. You can take Ted for a run in the park and make him Ted met his friends in the park, and they all ran around together. They played hide and chased a ball and each other, and made a lot of noise. Ted was tired and quiet for the rest of the day, but the next morning he was as playful as ever. He wasn't being naughty, he was just being a lively pup. He hunted around for old Teddy and was delighted to see him on the windowsill. He climbed up on a chair and managed to pull him down. He ran out with him to the garden and tossed him up in the air over his head, and old Teddy disappeared. Ted was amazed and ran about, looking everywhere for him. He rushed around the house and all over the garden. He hunted under the hedge and through the piles of autumn leaves. Sophie and Ben came, but there was no sign of old Teddy. Mrs. Forfar said, "I told you not to be so rough with him, Ted. Perhaps he's hiding away somewhere to have a little peace and quiet." Ted was very sad, and the children brought some of their toys to comfort him. There was a white rabbit and a dolly, a wind-up mouse and a spinning top. But poor Ted was too sad to play with any of them. He missed his dear old Teddy. It was the end of the autumn now, and Mrs. Forfar locked the garden shed and put away the tools and flower pots. They settled down for the cold winter days. Ted was growing up fast and becoming much more sensible. There were still lovely walks and fun with the children in the park. But when they came home to sit by the fire, poor Ted would fuss about trying to ask Mrs. Forfar to find his old Teddy for him. When the spring came at last, and the daffodils popped up in the garden, Mrs. Forfar decided to rake over the flower beds and prepare for the summer. Sophie and Ben came to help. They needed the wheelbarrow and unlocked the shed door to take it out. They couldn't believe their eyes, for behind the wheelbarrow was old Teddy, upside down and covered in cobwebs. He'd been locked in the shed the whole winter. "Ted, Ted," they called, "come quickly. Come and see who's here." Ted raced over to the shed. Sophie and Ben held old Teddy up, and Ted opened his eyes wide with delight. He carried him into the house to show Mrs. Forfar. He was very excited, wagging his tail, picking him up and putting him down. Everyone was joyful and delighted to see old Teddy again. Ted was so happy and kept cuddling him with his nose and paws. Then suddenly Mrs. Forfar said, "Ted, it's amazing. Just look how you've grown. You're much bigger than old Teddy now. He won't have to look after you any more. You will have to look after him." "He will! He will!" Sophie and Ben cried together. And do you know, that is just what he did.